They think my family's 100-year-old farm is just an eyesore in their way. With forged papers and bulldozers, they leveled the barn my great-grandfather, Elias Thornton, built with his own hands. It's for a community parking lot, they said, quickly pouring concrete to appease the neighbors, but I uncovered their secret plan, a small shopping center, hidden behind that facade. What Olivia Grayson, president of the Pinecrest Hills Homeowners Association, didn't expect was that my grandfather, Samuel Thornton, had secured water control rights for the entire area decades ago. After confronting her face-to-face at their fake parking lot, ribbon cutting and being ignored, I turned a hidden valve my grandfather left behind, a valve that could flood their newly built lot with mud in just a few hours. Do you have the guts to use a forgotten legal right to reclaim your family's stolen legacy? I'm Jake Thornton, 55 years old, and the Thornton family has worked this 15-acre farm in Fairview, Ohio, since 1887. My great-grandfather, Elias Thornton, bought this land with gold coins he saved from the West Virginia coal mines. He chose this spot for the clear water stream and the rich black soil, perfect for the sustainable farming techniques he learned from the old country across the ocean. With rugged hands and a steel will, he felled timber from the nearby forest, building the blazing red barn I grew up in. I can still hear my grandmother's stories of the nights he worked by moonlight, hammering each nail to shelter us through that first winter. That barn wasn't just a hayloft, it was Elias's promise to his descendants, the heart of the farm, the place where I felt his breath every time I stepped through its weathered wooden door. But the one who truly made this farm a marvel was my grandfather, Samuel Thornton. He didn't just maintain what Elias left, he turned it into something greater. During the Dust Bowl, when dry winds stripped neighbors' land bare, Samuel did the unthinkable. He teamed up with engineers from the state university, pouring every penny earned over 3 years into a clever irrigation system. He dug channels, built small dams, and installed control valves, harnessing clear water stream to keep the soil moist and save the crops. I still remember him at the kitchen table, his sinewy hands sketching maps of that system, each line as careful as a work of art. "Water is life, Jake," he told me when I was little, perched on his knee, wide-eyed at the fading ink lines. "Control the water, and you control everything." Samuel's system didn't just save our farm through those dry years, it became a water source for the whole area, a gift he shared with the community, asking nothing but respect in return. When other farms collapsed, we stood firm, and the Thornton farm became a symbol of resilience. Samuel didn't stop there, he signed legal papers with the state, locking in our family's water control rights with ironclad terms he believed would protect us through every generation. I still recall him leading me out to the fields, pointing at the hidden valves underground and saying, "This is our power, Jake. Never forget it." I never imagined that, years later, those very valves would become my weapon to take back what they stole. I've lived my whole life on this land, carrying on my father's and grandfather's work. My wife Clara and I raised our kids here, teaching them to farm and love the land like our ancestors did. Every morning, I'd stand before the barn, its peeling red paint still proud, feeling connected to Elias and Samuel. We grew wheat, corn and organic vegetables, supplying the local school, food bank and Fairview Farmers Market. That peaceful life stretched on for years, even as the land around us changed. Neighboring fields turned into packed houses, asphalt roads, and Pinecrest Hills tennis courts. I negotiated with Oakwood Development from the start, signing a clear deal that our farm would stay independent, free from any homeowners association rule. The papers were filed with the county, we shook hands, and for 2 decades, I lived in peace with my new neighbors. Then Olivia Grayson arrived. She moved from Detroit to Pinecrest Hills, a former marketing exec with perfectly dyed blonde hair and a fake smile that never reached her eyes. Within months, she seized the HOA presidency, bringing ambitions to erase anything that didn't fit her luxury vision. To Olivia, my farm wasn't a legacy, it was a blight, blocking Pinecrest Hills' progress. She started with letters on thick paper, claiming my barn was an unauthorized structure, that the rooster's crow was noise pollution. I knew the Oakwood Development deal protected me, but Olivia didn't care about papers. She wanted my land, and she had plans bigger than the parking lot she claimed. When the bulldozers came, I didn't just lose the barn, I lost a piece of my family's soul. But Olivia didn't know Samuel left me something stronger than the law: water control, hidden in the old channels and small dams he built. They thought they could flatten my history with concrete and fake papers, but I faced her at that parking lot ribbon cutting. "Give me my land back," I said, voice shaking with rage. She smirked, brushing me off like I was nothing. That was her biggest mistake. I turned the hidden valve my grandfather left, and their community parking lot would soon be swamped in mud, a lesson they'd never forget. When the neighboring fields around my farm in Fairview, Ohio, turned into packed houses and Pinecrest Hills tennis courts, I thought I could live quietly beside that growth. I'd negotiated hard with Oakwood Development from the beginning, signing a clear deal that my farm would stay independent, free from any homeowners association rule. The papers were filed with the county, we shook hands, and for 2 decades, I grew award-winning organic vegetables, supplying the local school, food bank, and Fairview Farmers Market. My wife Clara and I raised our kids here, teaching them the sustainable farming techniques Elias and Samuel passed down. Everything changed when Olivia Grayson showed up. Olivia moved from Detroit to Pinecrest Hills, a 55-year-old former marketing exec with perfectly dyed blonde hair and a golf-tanned glow. She quickly climbed to HOA president, bringing a ruthless edge and a fake smile that never reached her eyes. To Olivia, my century-old farm wasn't a legacy, it was a blight, blocking her luxury vision for Pinecrest Hills. She targeted me with a systematic campaign. The first letters arrived on thick cream paper, with the HOA logo, listing imaginary violations. Elias's blazing red barn, once a tourist photo spot, was called an unauthorized structure, exceeding height limits. The rooster's crow, echoing over this land for over a century, suddenly became residential noise pollution. Each letter arrived like clockwork, every Monday morning, threatening $100 daily fines for non-compliance. I called the Fairview County Planning Office, and they confirmed what I knew: my farm was exempt from HOA rules under the original Oakwood Development deal. I chose the peaceful route. I invited Olivia to tour the farm, hoping she'd see its historical and community value. If she sees the Lincoln Elementary kids planting pumpkins, or the veterans working the lavender field, I told Clara while preparing, maybe she'll realize we're not just growing crops, we're growing a community. Olivia arrived, driving a gleaming white Range Rover, with 3 HOA board members and a camera in tow. She didn't care about the vegetable beds, or stories of Elias and Samuel. She snapped photos of every rotting fence post, every old tractor part, like they were proof of decay. She wrinkled her nose at the compost pile, and yelped dramatically when a harmless garden snake slithered by. "It's not personal, Jake," Olivia said, flashing a practiced smile with zero warmth. "We're just maintaining community standards. Pinecrest Hills residents pay top dollar for luxury homes, not to live next to this." The next day, Tom Wheeler knocked on my door. He was Olivia's old Detroit partner, now a real estate developer, with a slick smile and an expensive suit. $800,000, he said, offering a figure for land worth triple that. I refused. His smile froze instantly. "You should reconsider, Mr. Thornton," he said, voice cold as steel. "Your great-grandfather's barn, your heritage crops, the stream where your kids fished, what are those memories worth against our offer? Things can get messy for stubborn holdouts who don't see progress." When threats didn't work, the harassment ramped up. Daily fines started piling up, despite no legal basis. Anonymous calls brought environmental inspectors to check agricultural runoff. They found nothing. Someone even reported my healthy livestock to animal control. I had Henry Brooks, an old friend and family lawyer, review the Oakwood Development deal. "They have zero authority over your property," Henry confirmed, flipping through yellowed pages. "This harassment is illegal. We sent a cease and desist letter, and it bought 3 weeks of peace." Then I saw unmarked survey stakes pop up along the eastern boundary, the fertile plot, where I grow heirloom tomatoes for 5 local restaurants. That's when I knew they weren't just pressuring me, they were gearing up to steal my land outright. Olivia and Tom didn't understand what they were up against. They saw me as an old farmer clinging to the past, but I had something they never expected: Elias and Samuel's legacy, not just in the land, but in the water channels and valves my grandfather left. They'd torn down my barn, but I wouldn't let them take everything. Their community parking lot was just the start, and I'd make them pay for underestimating the Thorntons. I knew Olivia Grayson and Tom Wheeler were plotting something bigger than harassment letters or empty threats, but nothing prepared me for the day they struck. It was a normal morning. I was driving my old pickup to Lincoln Elementary in Fairview to deliver organic veggies, heirloom tomatoes, pumpkins, and sweet corn the kids loved. I was unloading the last crates when my phone rang. Clara's panicked voice crackled through the speaker. "They're tearing down the fence, Jake. Bulldozers are at the boundary. Get back now." I dropped the produce, jumped in the truck, and floored it home. My mind raced, but deep down, I'd sensed this coming, since those survey stakes appeared along the eastern boundary. When I got there, the sight stopped my heart. 2 yellow Caterpillar bulldozers roared, their steel blades smashing into the 100-year-old oak fence Elias had built. The posts splintered into pieces, scattered across the dirt like a slain animal's remains. The bulldozers didn't stop there. They charged straight for the red barn, home to the family's antique tractor, Samuel's painstakingly curated heirloom seed collection, and the tools I'd maintained across generations. A crowd gathered, some Pinecrest Hills residents watching in horror, others nodding approval. Olivia Grayson stood behind a line of cops, clutching a glossy black briefcase, lips curled in a triumphant smile. Next to her was Daniel Hayes, Olivia's brother-in-law, and Fairview County Deputy Sheriff, in his stiff uniform. I leapt from the truck, sprinting toward the barn, yelling, "Stop, this is private property, protected by county law." But Daniel blocked me, one hand on my shoulder, the other flashing handcuffs. "This is all legal, old man," he sneered. "The county approved our community improvement project. You should have taken the money when you had the chance." I pulled away, but he was stronger, and I felt the cold bite of metal as the cuffs snapped shut. They shoved me into the back of a patrol car, and from there, I could only watch through the window, helpless as my family's legacy crumbled to dust. The bulldozers hit the barn, with a sickening crash. The beams Elias had hand-hewn snapped like matchsticks, the red tin roof collapsing in shards. Dust billowed up, metal screeched against wood, and it felt like my own heart was being ripped apart. That barn was what Elias built during the Great Depression, using timber from this very land. It was where Samuel stored the seeds that saved us through the Dust Bowl, where my father taught me to fix tractors, and where I taught my kids the value of work. Now it was rubble, and I could do nothing but watch from the patrol car, hands cuffed, eyes blurring with rage and powerlessness. Clara stood nearby, filming on her phone, tears streaming down her face. A cop snatched it away, claiming she was interfering with official business. But they didn't know about the security cameras I'd installed weeks earlier on Henry Brooks's advice. After the harassment letters and survey stakes, Henry had warned me, "They won't stop, Jake. Be ready." I'd hidden cameras around the barn, tucked in discreet corners, and they caught everything, every bulldozer swipe, every word from Olivia. As she stood near the machines, I heard her clearly over the noise, "Make sure that ugly barn is completely flattened. We need a clean space for the shopping center." That careless remark, ringing out amid the engine roar, would be her undoing. But in that moment, trapped in the patrol car, I felt only despair, like my family's entire world had been crushed under steel blades. 6 hours later, they released me with no charges, because there was no legal crime to pin on me. I returned to the farm to find Clara among kind neighbors bearing food and outrage. The barn was now a pile of debris, a fertile acre flattened, and a chain-link fence surrounded the area where a new sign declared, "Grayson Parking Lot, coming soon." The land seizure permit Olivia waved around was fake, printed on Fairview County letterhead. Henry called the county manager, who confirmed, no such permit was ever approved. But that didn't change the reality. My barn was gone, and Olivia stood there, thinking she'd won. They didn't know I had cameras, papers, and most importantly, Samuel's legacy. The barn might be destroyed, but the water control my grandfather left was still in my hands. Olivia and Tom thought they could steal my land with bulldozers and forged documents, but I'd show them the Thorntons don't break easily. That day, I lost a piece of history, but I swore their community parking lot would pay a heavy price. When they let me out of the patrol car, after 6 hours of baseless detention, I returned to the farm numb. Elias's blazing red barn was now a heap of splintered wood, a fertile acre flattened, and the Grayson parking lot, "Coming soon" sign, stood like a taunt. Clara was among kind neighbors bearing food and outrage, but I couldn't speak. I just sat there, staring at the void where the barn once stood, feeling like my family's world had been erased. Olivia Grayson and Tom Wheeler thought they'd beaten me, that fake papers and bulldozers could level the Thornton family's century-old legacy. But they didn't know I still had something Samuel left, buried in the farm's old channels and small dams. That night, in our kitchen, Clara and I spread papers across the table, deeds, surveys, the Oakwood development deal, and the water documents Samuel signed with the state decades ago. Henry Brooks, our family lawyer and old friend, came over as soon as he heard the barn was gone. "This is criminal," Henry said, his usually calm voice trembling with anger. "Forged government papers, property destruction, trespassing and fraud. I'll file for an emergency injunction by morning." We reviewed the fake land seizure permit Olivia had waved around, a sheet printed on Fairview County letterhead, but the county manager confirmed to Henry over the phone that no such project was approved. That gave us a start, but I needed more to reclaim what was lost. Then Henry pointed to an old document, yellowed paper with Samuel Thornton's slanted handwriting in the corner. "Look at this, Jake," he said, voice rising with excitement. It was the 1912 water rights certificate, signed during the Dust Bowl, when drought bankrupted 3 neighboring farms. The document spelled out our family's exclusive control over the Clearwater Stream's dam and channel system, with terms allowing residential use, but with a catch. If our agricultural rights were violated, I could cut off all water access with 30 days' notice, no court approval needed. The legal jargon was dense, but the meaning was clear. Samuel's system wasn't just a water source, it was a power tool he'd designed to protect us. I held the document, fingers trembling as they brushed Samuel's signature. Memories flooded back, of me as a kid, trailing him to the fields, watching him point out the hidden valves underground, and the small dam near Clearwater Stream. "This is our strength, Jake," he'd said, voice low and warm. "Water will protect our family when the time comes." I'd never fully grasped it until now. Henry explained further, "When Pinecrest Hills was built, they tapped into your system instead of running county water lines to save cash. That $1 million mistake is their nightmare now." He pointed to a faded clause: "If agricultural rights were breached, like the barn's destruction, I could terminate water rights without asking anyone." Olivia and her bulldozers had broken that condition when they leveled my land. I didn't sleep that night. Images of the barn, crumbling under bulldozers, replayed, but now I had hope. I remembered the security cameras Henry urged me to install. They'd caught Olivia saying, "Make sure that ugly barn is completely flattened. We need a clean space for the shopping center." That evidence, paired with Samuel's water rights, was the weapon I needed. The next morning, Henry filed for an emergency injunction, and demanded all correspondence between the HOA board and Tom Wheeler. The emails we got exposed the whole scheme. In one, Olivia wrote to Tom, "The old farmer doesn't know he's sitting on gold. Once we get the land, we'll build the shopping center, stores, cafes, the works. The profit will dwarf this hassle." Henry chuckled slowly, eyes glinting like Samuel's when he outsmarted a cattle trader. "They dug their own grave, Jake," he said. I looked at Samuel's elegant signature on the papers, feeling like he was reaching through time to shield me. Olivia and Tom thought they could steal my land with brute force and trickery, but they didn't know Samuel's water system, now mine, would turn their community parking lot into a muddy swamp. I wasn't sure exactly what I'd do yet, but I knew one thing: the Thorntons don't give up easy, and I'd use my grandfather's legacy to make them regret it. After discovering Samuel's water rights, I felt a flicker of hope amid the wreckage. Olivia Grayson and Tom Wheeler left behind. Elias's barn was gone, but the Thornton family legacy lived on, in the old channels, small dams and control valves Samuel built. I knew I could flood their community parking lot with mud, but I needed a solid plan. That night, in our kitchen, I sat with Clara, Henry Brooks, and an unexpected ally, Walt Jenkins, an old neighbor who'd worked with my grandfather during the Dust Bowl. Walt knocked as dusk fell, his weathered straw hat in hand, eyes sharp as he heard about the water rights. Samuel always said that system was an ace up his sleeve, he rasped, voice rough with age. I helped him dig the channels near Clearwater Stream. If you want payback, mud from the east field is the perfect way. I called my oldest son Ethan, an engineer from Cleveland, to come home. He arrived the next morning with a laptop and digital maps. We spread Samuel's papers across the table, the irrigation system blueprints, the 1912 water rights certificate, and started plotting. Ethan analyzed the maps, pointing to the small dam near Clearwater Stream. "This is the key, Dad," he said, finger tracing the screen. "Open the main valve during heavy rain, and water will carry mud from the wheat field straight into their parking lot. The slope's just right for a strong flow." Walt nodded, adding, "Samuel designed that dam to drain flood season rain. Breach a small section, and mud will pour down like a waterfall." I looked to Clara, waiting for her reaction. She shook her head, worry clear in her eyes. "If we do this, they'll sue us, Jake. We've lost the barn. What if we lose the whole farm?" I took her hand, voice steady. "Henry says we're legally in the clear. They broke the water terms when they trashed our land. This isn't just revenge, it's taking back what's ours." Henry flipped through the water rights certificate, reading the key clause aloud. "If agricultural rights are violated, the Thornton family may terminate water access without approval." He smiled faintly. "Destroying the barn was a clear breach. Opening the valve is your right, Jake." Walt chimed in with tales of the 1930s flood season, when he and Samuel used the system to save the fields while water raged but didn't ruin their land. "Samuel knew how to tame water," he said. "You just need to do it like he did." Walt's words swayed Clara. She sighed, nodding. "If you're sure, Jake, then do it, but be careful." I decided to wait for a big rain. Weather reports predicted a storm by the weekend. Over the next 2 days, Walt and I checked the fields. We walked along Clearwater Stream, finding the small dam Samuel built from river stones. It still stood strong, though moss-coated, and the main valve slightly rusted. I turned the valve experimentally, hearing metal groan, and a trickle of water flowed out. "Still works fine," Walt said, clapping my shoulder. I looked down at Pinecrest Hill's newly built parking lot, a few hundred yards away, its concrete gleaming in the sun. "They won't see it coming," I whispered, feeling like my grandfather was beside me, smiling. Ethan stayed, helping me calculate the flow. "When the rain hits, you just open this valve and breach a section of the dam," he said. "Mud will flood down in hours, enough to turn that parking lot into a swamp." I nodded, picturing Olivia and Tom panicking as their shopping center dreams sank in red muck. Clara prepped a camera, not the phone confiscated earlier, but an old one from the shed. "We need proof," she said, her voice steadier now. I looked around the table, Clara, Ethan, Walt, Henry, and felt Samuel's legacy alive in each of them. Olivia thought she could flatten my history, but I'd use water and mud to prove her wrong. The night before the storm, I stood alone by the dam, hand on the cold stone. "You were right, Grandpa," I whispered. "Water is power." I knew what I was about to do wasn't just revenge. It was a way to protect what the Thornton family had built across generations. Their parking lot would soon feel that power. The storm hit as forecast, bringing heavy rain and gusting winds through Fairview, Ohio. I stood inside, watching through the window as drops pounded the glass, knowing the moment had come. Olivia Grayson and Tom Wheeler thought they'd won by leveling my barn, erecting their community parking lot, to mask their shopping center scheme. But tonight, I'd use my grandfather Samuel's legacy, to show them the Thorntons don't break easily. Clara, Ethan, Walt Jenkins and Henry Brooks had helped me plan. Now it was time to act. As darkness fell, I donned a raincoat, my father's old straw hat, and stepped out with Walt. Clara held the old camera, determined to record it all. "Be careful, Jake," she said, voice trembling but resolute. I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility, not just to my family, but to Elias and Samuel, who'd trusted this land. Walt led the way through the wheat field, now rain-soaked, to the small dam near Clearwater Stream. Rain poured, turning the ground beneath into slick red mud. I looked down at Pinecrest Hill's parking lot, a few hundred yards off, its shiny concrete now glinting under streetlights, the Grayson parking lot, sign standing bold like a dare. Walt pointed to the main valve, rusted but solid. "Open this first," he said, voice cutting through the rain. I gripped the handle, twisting hard, hearing metal screech as water surged through the old channels. Then I climbed the dam, using a crowbar to break a section of stone Samuel had laid, not too big, just enough for water to sweep mud from the field downhill. The water roared, blending with the rain, and I saw a murky red torrent rush down the slope, straight for the parking lot. Clara raised the camera, capturing the mud spilling over the chain-link fence, swallowing the fresh concrete. I stood there, drenched, watching my grandfather's legacy turn into a weapon, not to destroy, but to reclaim justice. By morning, Olivia's community parking lot was no longer the pristine image she'd bragged about. Thick red mud coated the concrete, knee-deep in spots, half burying the Grayson parking lot sign. Cars from a few early residents testing the lot were stuck, wheels spinning uselessly in the mire. I stood on the hill, looking down at the chaos, feeling both satisfaction and bitterness. Olivia called an emergency meeting at the Pinecrest Hills clubhouse, her voice blaring over a megaphone. "This is Jake Thornton's vandalism. We'll sue him dry." But residents started murmuring. Why did the mud only flood the parking lot, not their homes? Doubt crept through the crowd. I walked down to the parking lot, still in my raincoat and straw hat, clutching the 1912 water rights certificate. Olivia stood there in her pale blue suit, holding a clipboard, telling HOA members about the project's success. I cut in, "What do you think you're doing on my land?" My voice rang out, overpowering the lingering rain, turning heads. Olivia's smile flickered. "Mr. Thornton, this is community property now. We've been over this." I held up the papers. "This is still my land, and you know it. You built this lot illegally, and that shopping center you planned will never happen." The crowd stirred. I turned to them. "Did you know your HOA president planned to swap this lot for stores and cafes? That she forged papers to steal my land?" Olivia tried to stay calm. "I don't know what he's talking about. This is just a lovely community parking lot." But residents started asking questions, a few stepping closer to me, curious. "You'll regret this," Olivia hissed, voice low but sharp. "No," I shot back, firm, "you will. You've got until sundown to recognize my land rights, or this lot stays a swamp." I walked away, leaving her facing a growingly skeptical crowd. When they ignored my ultimatum, I returned to the dam with Clara that night. Water still flowed, but I adjusted the valve to increase the mud. Clara filmed, capturing me turning the metal wheel, red muck surging harder into the parking lot. At first, no one noticed. Cars still parked, people still walked. But by noon the next day, mud filled every crevice, cars couldn't move, and panicked residents called Olivia. She arrived, wine glass in hand from the interrupted ribbon cutting, yelling into her phone, "Turn the water back on. This is illegal." I replied calmly, "Actually, I've met every legal requirement. You breached my rights by trashing my land. Meet my terms, or get ready for more mud." The parking lot was now a red quagmire, and I knew I'd struck a hard blow against Olivia. But I also knew the fight wasn't over. She wouldn't give up easily. Luckily, I had the cameras, the papers, and Samuel's legacy. Local media, led by Lisa Harper from the Fairview Gazette, started paying attention. The mud wasn't just revenge, it was a statement that the Thorntons wouldn't let anyone take what's ours. After Pinecrest Hills community parking lot turned into a red quagmire under the mud from my field, Olivia Grayson didn't sit still. She sued me for vandalizing community property, demanding damages and a court order to restore the lot. But I was ready. With Samuel's papers, security camera footage, and Henry Brooks' support, I knew I had not just water rights but justice on my side. The battle shifted from the fields to the Fairview County courtroom, and I was determined to make Olivia pay for what she'd done to my family's barn. The trial came days after the mud swamped the lot. I walked into court, hands full with a thick file, the 1887 deed from Elias, Samuel's 1912 water rights certificate, and the 1994 Oakwood Development Agreement. Clara sat beside me, eyes steady, while Henry prepped the legal brief. Olivia arrived with 3 lawyers from a big Detroit firm, including Tom Wheeler, now posing as her legal advisor. Judge Margaret Evans, a middle-aged woman with silver hair and a sharp voice, presided. She peered over her glasses, calling both sides to present. Olivia went first, her voice smooth as when she'd swayed Pinecrest Hill's residents. Your Honor, she said, Jake Thornton deliberately sabotaged our community property by flooding our parking lot, a county-approved project to improve residents' lives. He acted out of personal spite, and we seek damages and an injunction against further interference. One of her lawyers showed photos of the mud-soaked lot, stuck cars, the Grayson parking lot, sign half submerged as proof of my vandalism. I listened, blood heating my face, but Henry touched my shoulder, whispering, "Wait for our turn." When our turn came, Henry stood, voice calm but cutting. Your Honor, we don't deny Mr. Thornton opened the water valve, but it was his legal right under the 1912 certificate, signed with the state of Ohio. He held up the document, pointing to Samuel's signature, and the key clause: if agricultural rights were violated, the Thorntons could cut off water access without approval. Pinecrest Hill's HOA demolished Mr. Thornton's barn, an agriculturally protected structure, with forged papers, clearly breaching this condition, Henry said. He presented the 1887 deed, proving our farm predated Pinecrest Hills by a century, and the 1994 Oakwood Agreement, confirming our exemption from HOA control. I stood, hands on the judge's bench, opening the file my father taught me to value above gold. This is the deed my great-grandfather Elias Thornton signed when he bought this land, I said, voice shaking with emotion. He came here with nothing, built that barn with timber he felled to leave for his kids. I flipped to the 1912 water rights certificate, Ohio's seal still crisp. My grandfather, Samuel Thornton, built an irrigation system to save the farm through the Dust Bowl, and he locked it down with this. Finally, I showed the 1994 agreement, signed when Ethan was in diapers. I promised my son this land would be his legacy. The HOA had no right to touch it. Then Henry requested the security camera footage be played, the clip Clara and I had held back until now. The courtroom fell silent as Olivia's voice crackled through. Make sure that ugly barn is completely flattened. We need a clean space for the shopping center. Murmurs rippled, and Pinecrest Hills residents like Betty and Carl Simmons, who'd backed Olivia, shot her doubtful looks. Olivia paled, whispering to Tom, but no one heard. Your Honor, Henry said, voice firm, we have video proof. Mrs. Grayson admitted intent to build a shopping center, not a community lot. This is fraud, trespass, destruction of property, and abuse of power. Margaret Evans frowned, eyeing Olivia over her glasses. Mrs. Grayson, what do you have to say? Olivia rose, voice shaky but clinging to confidence. That was just talk in the heat of the moment, Your Honor. Our project was for the community, and Mr. Thornton overreacted. But her argument crumbled against the evidence. I watched her, recalling her fake smile when she refused to return my land at the lot. Now that smile was gone. Judge Margaret tapped her gavel, voice stern. Based on the evidence, I'm issuing a temporary injunction, halting all activity on the parking lot, until a full trial in 3 months. Ownership will be settled then. She looked at Olivia, adding, I advise Mrs. Grayson and the HOA to closely review Mr. Thornton's documents. Your actions suggest serious violations. She tapped again, ending the session. I exhaled, feeling like Samuel was patting my shoulder from the past. That night, in our kitchen, Henry and I reviewed the case. He pointed to the water rights certificate, grinning. They didn't expect Samuel to be this smart. This system didn't just save the farm, it saved the community, and now it's your weapon. I nodded, knowing the video and papers had cornered Olivia. But I also knew she wouldn't quit easily. She still thought she could turn it around. What she didn't count on was the Thorntons' resilience, and the water power I still held. The lot might be mud-soaked, but this legal fight was just starting, and I wouldn't stop until I had everything back. Judge Margaret Evans' temporary injunction was a small win, but I knew Olivia Grayson and Tom Wheeler wouldn't give up easily. Their community parking lot remained a red bog from my field's mud, a sticky mess local kids started calling Grayson's swamp with giggles. I didn't do it to gloat or revel, I did it to protect the Thornton family legacy, to show them destroying Elias's barn wasn't something they could shrug off. What I didn't expect was that it woke up Pinecrest Hills, turning residents from indifferent or hostile into people questioning Olivia and her HOA. The day after the trial, Lisa Harper, an investigative reporter from the Fairview Gazette, reached out. She'd heard about the mud-flooded lot and the lawsuit, wanting an interview to get the full story. I invited her to the farm, showed her the splintered pile where the barn once stood, and walked her through it all, from Olivia's harassment letters, to the day bulldozers flattened my legacy, to the water rights Samuel left me. I gave her the security camera video, where Olivia said plain as day, "Make sure that ugly barn is completely flattened. We need a clean space for the shopping center." Lisa scribbled fast, eyes lighting up at the 1912 water rights certificate. "This is big, Mr. Thornton," she said. "I'll dig deeper." Lisa's article dropped days later, headlined "Pinecrest Hills HOA Scams Local Farmer for Secret Shopping Center." She exposed that Olivia's husband, a Detroit businessman, took a $250,000 stake from Tom Wheeler 3 days before the bulldozers hit my farm, a conflict of interest she never disclosed to residents. The piece quoted Olivia's email, "The old farmer doesn't know he's sitting on gold. Once we get the land, we'll build the shopping center, stores, cafes, the works." Pinecrest Hills residents read it, and their anger didn't turn on me like Olivia hoped. It swung back at her. Betty and Carl Simmons, an older couple in Pinecrest Hills since its early days, called an emergency community meeting without the HOA board. They asked me to speak directly to the neighbors. I walked into a packed room, wearing a red flannel shirt and old jeans, hands still stained from the field. I wasn't there to brag or fight. I brought proof, the water rights certificate, Olivia's forged papers, and a copy of the security video. "I didn't want to hurt anyone," I said, voice low but clear. "I just wanted to protect the farm my family's built since 1887. Olivia and Tom tore down my barn, used your HOA dues to do it, and planned a shopping center instead of the parking lot they promised." The room buzzed. Betty stood, voice trembling. "We trusted Mrs. Grayson when she said it was for the community. Now we know the truth, and we're sorry, Jake." Carl nodded, adding, "We always liked your farm. It gives this place soul. She fooled us." I showed them the video, and as Olivia's voice played, some shook their heads, others muttered in anger. Lisa's article also revealed HOA fees could make residents legally liable for Olivia's illegal moves, and that lit a fire. "I don't want to punish innocent families," I said. "I just want my farm restored and protected. We've been good neighbors for 5 generations. I want to keep it that way." The meeting ended with a petition to oust the current HOA board, and by day's end, 85% of households had signed. Olivia tried a counter meeting, calling me a community extortionist, but no one bought it anymore. Betty and Carl came to my house later, bringing a pie and an offer. "We'll help you rebuild the barn, Jake. It's the right thing." I nodded, touched by a shift I hadn't expected. The mud-soaked lot sat abandoned, a local joke, and residents started seeing me not as an enemy, but as a guardian of their history too. I sent Olivia and the HOA a formal notice through Henry, fully restore my land, pay damages, and legally recognize my farm as forever independent from their control, or the mud keeps coming. Olivia ignored it, but community pressure mounted. Lisa Harper kept digging, interviewing old-timers who recalled the Oakwood development deal, and the story spread across local papers. What I didn't expect was the mud, not only humiliating Olivia, it bonded me with people who'd once sided with her. From an isolated farmer, I became the center of an unlikely alliance, and I knew Elias and Samuel's legacy wasn't just mine anymore, it belonged to Fairview. Olivia clung to power, but her foundation was crumbling. Residents weren't the apathetic crowd I'd faced the day my barn fell, they were ready to stand with me. I felt Samuel's strength in every signature on that petition, every apology from a neighbor. The lot might be a swamp, but the community had woken up, and I wouldn't stop until I had it all back. The Pinecrest Hills community waking up after the parking lot turned to mud changed everything. Olivia Grayson was no longer the untouchable power, she was now the target of rage from the very residents who'd trusted her. The petition with 85% signatures to oust the HOA board was a heavy blow, but I knew the fight wasn't over until the Thornton family farm was fully restored. Henry Brooks filed for an emergency hearing with Judge Margaret Evans, leaning on the security camera evidence, Samuel's water rights, and growing resident support. I wanted Elias's barn back, and I wanted no one to touch my land again. The emergency hearing came 5 days after the community meeting. The Fairview County courtroom was packed, not just with lawyers and witnesses, but Pinecrest Hills residents, many wearing buttons reading Save Thornton Farm. Olivia arrived with her 3 Detroit lawyers, including Tom Wheeler, but her confidence had visibly faded. She wore her usual pale blue suit, but her hands shook holding papers. I walked in with the 1887 deed, the 1912 water rights certificate, and the 1994 Oakwood Agreement, documents my father told me to cherish above gold. Clara sat beside me, gripping my hand, while Henry prepped to argue. Margaret Evans banged her gavel, calling for final statements. Olivia's lawyer weakly argued the parking lot was community property, and my mud flood was deliberate sabotage. But Henry hit back hard. "Your Honor," he said, voice steely, "Pinecrest Hills HOA demolished Mr. Thornton's barn with forged papers, violating agricultural rights protected by the 1912 certificate. His valve opening was legal, and this video proves Mrs. Grayson's true intent." He replayed the security footage, Olivia's voice ringing clear. "Make sure that ugly barn is completely flattened. We need a clean space for the shopping center." The room stirred, and Olivia bowed her head, avoiding eyes. Margaret turned to Olivia, tone harsh. "Mrs. Grayson, as a former practicing attorney, you must know the gravity of forging legal documents. In 30 years on this bench, I've rarely seen such a blatant property rights violation. Mr. Thornton's water rights are legal and were properly exercised after the easement breach." She looked at me, softening. "What does Mr. Thornton request?" Henry stood for me. "Full restoration of the property, including rebuilding the barn to its original design, damages, and a legal agreement recognizing his farm as forever independent from the HOA." Olivia whispered to her lawyers, but the new HOA board, led by Carl Simmons, elected in the emergency meeting, stood up. "We agree to Mr. Thornton's terms," Carl said, voice firm. "We want to make this right." Margaret banged her gavel, ruling I grant Mr. Thornton's terms. Additionally, I order a permanent 100-foot development ban around the farm's boundary, creating a lasting buffer. She eyed Olivia. "Mrs. Grayson, I suggest you tread carefully, as criminal charges remain a distinct possibility." The hearing ended, and I felt like Samuel was smiling from the past. Change came fast. Olivia resigned as HOA president within a week, as the county prosecutor opened an investigation into the forged papers. She listed her house for sale, and her law license was suspended by the state pending the probe. The new HOA, under Carl, worked with me to restore the farm. Pinecrest Hills residents donated money and labor, joining local craftsmen to rebuild the barn with oak from nearby woods, matching Elias's original design, hand-hewn beams and peaked roof, that once defined Fairview. I stood amid the construction, watching each timber rise, feeling my family's legacy reborn. The new barn wasn't just a replica. We added a small agricultural education center, where Lincoln school kids could learn the sustainable farming Elias and Samuel pioneered. Betty Simmons led volunteers to replant a ruined acre with heirloom seeds from my stock. "This is our apology," she said, holding a bucket of tomato seedlings. The community started monthly Thornton Farm dinners, with my produce, and the gatherings got so popular that nearby areas copied them. Tom Wheeler and his company scrapped the shopping center plan as the scandal broke, and it spurred a new Ohio law, the Thornton Act, strengthening farmland protections against illegal development. Leaving court that day, dozens of residents approached, not with anger, but apologies and offers to help. Carl clapped my shoulder. "You showed us what matters, Jake." I nodded, feeling a bond I hadn't expected. Standing in the finished barn, I looked at Clara. Ethan and neighbors turned friends. Olivia thought she could flatten my history, but she'd unwittingly helped me build something bigger, a community that valued land and legacy. I touched the fresh timber, hearing wind through the roof, and knew Elias and Samuel would be proud. My farm wasn't just restored, it became Fairview's heart, stronger than ever. The Thornton Farm now stands as a symbol of Fairview, Ohio, not just for the rebuilt blazing red barn, but for what it represents. The Pinecrest Hills community, once divided by Olivia Grayson, now unites around the Thornton Farm dinners and the annual Farmers Fair. The Thornton Act was born in Ohio, safeguarding farmland from schemes like hers, bearing my name but serving as the legacy of my great-grandfather Elias and grandfather Samuel. Standing in the new barn, I look at Clara, Ethan and neighbors turned friends, feeling the power of water and mud, not just tools of revenge, but a bridge across time. Olivia thought she could flatten history with bulldozers and fake papers, but she learned the lesson Samuel always knew: the strongest rights sometimes hide in plain sight, quietly waiting through generations to protect what matters. I smile, touching the oak beam still fragrant with sap, knowing my family's legacy will endure, not just in the land but in the heart of the community I helped revive. The story of Jake Thornton and HOA destroyed my barn for a parking lot, so I flooded it with mud. Reflects real issues in today's American society, especially the clash between urban development and preserving personal heritage, as well as the power of community when facing injustice. In modern America, the sprawl of neighborhoods like Pinecrest Hills often threatens family farms like Jake's, where generations like Elias and Samuel poured sweat into building. Olivia Grayson and Tom Wheeler's use of forged papers to demolish Jake's barn echoes real-life land disputes, where developers exploit legal loopholes to seize farmland for commercial projects. Jake's flooding of the parking lot with mud, rooted in his 1912 water rights, highlights the importance of knowing your legal entitlements, a concept deeply tied to America's strong legal culture, where the law can shield citizens from overreach. The lesson here isn't just persistence, it's leveraging what you have, and building community alliances. Jake didn't just rely on Samuel's legacy, the irrigation system and documents, but leaned on Clara, Ethan, Walt, and eventually residents like Betty and Carl Simmons. This mirrors a truth in America today: an individual can take on big forces like an HOA, if they connect with those around them. Real-life advice is to dig into your history and rights, like Jake did with old papers, and speak up when wronged, but do it smartly and legally, as he used mud instead of violence. Plus, invest in community ties, because Pinecrest Hill's support helped Jake win his case and rebuild the barn. In a nation that prizes individualism, yet celebrates collective strength, Jake's story reminds us that legacy isn't just property, it's connection and the will to defend what matters, even against bulldozers or fake documents. If you love Jake Thornton's tale, and want to explore more journeys of defending heritage against injustice, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next video. Thanks for joining us, and see you soon to witness the power of community and land in the upcoming story.